So as a quick refresher for everyone, the reason we're not going 50 minutes on each team is because one, free agency is almost here and this is going to be dated as fuck. We will do longer, extensive deep dives into each team after free agency. We just want to get a feel for what's going on for every team. So these will be aimed to be 10 minutes or less on each squad, just like we've done in the previous look aheads. I will go into alphabetical order, which is always a risky proposition because I am known to get the alphabet wrong. And the first team up in the Atlantic Division alphabetically is the New York. I'm just kidding. It is the Boston Celtics, Bryan Toporek's favorite team.
Yes.
And I go through their, as for anyone who's doing this first time, I'll run through their vitals really quickly. Notable non-guarantees. There's Al Horford at 19.5 million of his 26.5 million is guaranteed. I imagine they're going to guarantee that. That would be shocking. That's really the only one that matters. There's Juwan Morgan has a team option, and then Nick Stauskas. Notable extension candidates. Jaylen Brown is extension eligible. And notable trade exceptions, they have that Evan Fournier one. It's 17.1 million. It expires on July 18th. They have a Juan Hernangomez one at 6.9 million, which expires January 19th. And then the Dennis Schroeder one at 5.9 million, which expires February 10th. They also have a Romeo Langford one for 3.8 million that expires February 10th. So they have a lot of like options with their trade exceptions. Their best spending tool, if they choose to use it, will be the mini MLE. It'll take too much for them to duck the luxury tax apron. And so, Bryan, just heading in for Boston, like what are the general things you're thinking about, needs, questions, priorities, or whatever, and how they should approach?
Yeah, I mean, the conversation after the run to the finals was, do they need a point guard, even though they got 2 wins away from winning the finals with Marcus Smart as their point guard? But I guess that will be one area of need in mind. Otherwise, like, they're of any team in this division, they're feeling pretty good about themselves. Like, they don't have a ton of major decisions to make this offseason. It's like, who do we spend the taxpayer mid-level on? And then otherwise, we're just going to basically run it back with this same core. Most of our guys are young enough that you can reasonably expect internal improvement to carry them even further. Like, I think that the biggest question is, like, does Jaylen Brown develop more of a ball handling this summer, or does Jason Tatum continue to refine his shot selection this summer? Can Robert Williams stay healthy and rehab that knee this summer so he can make it, unscathed through a playoff run next year? Like, those are all far more important than, like, who do they spend $6 million on?
For sure. And I saw people say the point guard criticism was overblown. I actually didn't think it was overblown. I think the interpretation of it was exaggerated. No, anyone who's thinking they need to go out and try to trade for like Chris Paul, no, that's not what they need. And as people pointed out, like I mentioned, this name is too ambitious given the market, like a Tyus Jones. They need someone on that level. And it doesn't matter if he wouldn't play in crunch time, because the first like 43 to 46 minutes of the game matter anyway. And you put yourself in a position where if you can take care of your possessions in a more efficient fashion, let's just say, where you're not letting the shot clock run all the time, where you're not committing all these turnovers, someone who's just more of a game manager. I think Marcus Smart and Jason Tatum are fantastic passers, especially Tatum now at this point, but it feels like they need a game manager. And it's not something, you don't even need to go nuclear. Although, like, they can't even get Mike Conley because you have to give up one of your core guys for it. But I do think even a point guard you could play through like the first 3.5 quarters would go a long way for them if they can help just delineate touches. The other thing that stands out, and like their shooting percentages are okay, they need someone who feels like a knockdown shooter that's not a star. Like, it's not Jason Tatum's off the dribble threes or Jaylen Brown's spot up attempts. Like, they need, and you can't bank on Marcus Smart to like get super hot. And he's improved his shooting a lot over the past 2 to 3 seasons. It just felt like and you want to be able to play that player in higher leverage moments where some people might say, well, that could be Peyton Pritchard, or maybe we're still hoping for Aaron Nesmith to be that. She's like, well, those guys probably aren't playing when it matters. And I think just in general, they just need an 8th guy. Like, their top 7, it's like they're really good. So if you find an 8th guy, again, maybe he's not playing in the high leverage moments, but if you're just extending your rotation that much, especially to the point when you get in the playoffs where there's just 8 guys you could rely on, do I think that's out there for the mini MLE? They're appealing enough to where if the money's equal, I would assume teams would choose them. But I'm looking at these trade exceptions, man. Like, the Evan Fournier one is massive, and they have like a bunch of medium-sized ones. So it's not outside the realm of possibility that they could make an impact move without trading one of their core guys. Like Derek White is sort of my cutoff. Like, you're not trading. I'm sure you would trade Horford in the right deal. I don't think, Tatum and Tatum's as untouchable as it gets, but like you don't need to move a Smart or a Robert Williams or a Horford or a White.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you look at the market outside of the top few guys, especially at guard, is just pretty barren. Unless, I mean, who knows? Kyrie Irving, who we'll talk about shortly, maybe he wants a Boston reunion at a $30 million discount. Because a point guard and a high leverage shooter can't do much better than Kyrie on the market. Assuming that is off the table, Tyus Jones is a great shout. I mean, like Ricky Rubio would be that table setting point guard, but he's not the shooter that you want. I guess if Patty Mills opts out, that's a possibility. Like if that's just completely crater.
My guess is he's not like Tyus Jones. I don't know if he gets as much as Tyus Jones. My guess is he'll be too expensive. But DeLon Wright?
Yeah. I mean, I wonder if like Smart, Wright, and White are all just kind of duplicative or triplicative, if
really
that's
fair.
a word. Yeah, like Dante DiVincenzo, I don't think you're going to pry out of Sacramento for $6 million because he's restricted. Like they would hopefully.
I like that you mentioned Rubio feels like the right answer because I imagine he's not going for more than the mini MLE when he's probably not playing for at least half the season. Doesn't give you the shooting, but again, someone who can be I'm not trying to be condescending when I put it this way, but the adult in the room on offense. When you like in the half court, like it feels like that's what they need. And if you're banking on Tatum and Smart to just make leaps and maybe even Brown there a little bit, that's fine. Maybe even White a little bit. But I would like to see them try and address it. Do any like other free agent targets or even trade targets spring to mind to you that would be good fits for this team?
Yeah, you mentioned knockdown shooter, so I immediately think Malik Monk, if he's willing to settle because I mean, he went ring chasing last year for a minimum. So if he can get even some portion of the taxpayer mid-level or the whole thing, that wouldn't help really with the ball handling, but he would be that, come flying around the screens type of shooter. Trade target, Nuggets fans are going to hate me because they are living in
where you're going because I'm
perpetual fear. Yeah, but Monte Morris, if they are really serious about just trimming salary, trying to duck the tax, like the problem is I don't know what Boston sends back. Like, is a future first enough for Monte Morris, or do you have to send like Pritchard or Neesmith back? But I mean that's probably the best fit / target they could acquire realistically.
I would do that in a heartbeat too. And I don't think the Nuggets should do it, but it does seem it's going to be like him or Will Barton because they're dead set on ducking attacks. And it probably makes more sense to be Will Barton just because Monte's more valuable to them at this point, but also his salary is bigger to where like you basically have to dump Monte Morris just to duck the taxes as of this moment. And so there's like more wiggle room with Barton's salary if you wanted to take back a player like Pritchard or somebody. But yeah, Monte Morris on the Celtics would be spectacular.
Yeah. I mean, again, like the Boston right now, if they aren't the team to beat in the East, looking across the landscape, like Milwaukee will be back next year, Miami will be back. Who knows about Brooklyn? But like they can feel pretty good about where they are, so they don't need to make any drastic moves this offseason, I would say. But yeah, if they wiggle their way into Monte Morris, I'm just gonna be miserable for a week.
Would Devontae Graham help this team at all?
Ooh, that's interesting. I mean,
you can say no because the look on your face insinuates.
No, I mean, like, yes. I don't know how much he moves their ceiling higher, but adding another good rotation player certainly wouldn't hurt. And if you're not giving up a ton to do it or anything of real value, like you've got the trade exception, he fits in there. Again, are you giving up Neesmith or Pritchard? Or are you giving up a future first? Like, I don't think New Orleans can realistically ask for, like a huge return on him. So that's an interesting call. I like that.
I have at least one more name for you, and I'm less excited about it. And it also I don't know why it just vacated my mind too. Oh, here it is. He would have to not be what he was this past season, but Cameron Payne.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's the question, right? And I guess we'll see what happens with Phoenix. Like if they let Ayton go and, some of those guys start to get a little nervous and they're looking around, they're like, ooh, this is not the situation we signed up for here. We thought we were re-signing with the title favorite. So I think it would more be like Cameron Payne might need to like ask for a trade because again, you're probably not getting a ton back for him. So I mean,
I would think that you would just offload him if the Celtics were willing to use a trade exception, would be my
Yeah.
thought at this point.
Yeah. Because I mean, well, who knows who's going to even own the team in 3 months? But the current owner is
Good point.
certainly notoriously cheap.
I have two names from the same team.
Okay.
They're looking. We know they have to dump other salary, and we'll get to that in a second. But Derrick Rose feels like he might. I'm talking about knockdown shooting. I'm just naming all these point guards that aren't knockdown shooters.
Sure.
And then
he's
this
at least better.
Right. This guy's not a point guard, and he's coming off foot surgery now. But Alec Burks, it's like someone else who fit. Like, I mean, so many players fit into their trade exceptions at this point. Let's be honest.
I mean, that's the luxury. Like, I don't know if they're going to end up using it or using the whole thing because they're already over the tax line. And like, I always say, like, the line of demarcation is like 15 to 20 million over. Like, if you're under that, the bill isn't like exorbitantly expensive. But once you get into like the 15 to 20 range, it starts piling up pretty quickly. So I would be surprised if they take like a full $17 million salary back, but neither of the guys you mentioned. I guess Derrick Rose is close, but like Burks is what, like 10, 11 million, somewhere around there?
Yeah, he's in there. So I had thought too, it turns out he makes too much. I didn't realize he was getting paid this much next season, but if they were trying to pay Brunson and didn't want to pay Brunson and Spencer Dinwiddie, I thought he fit into the Evan Fournier trade exception. I can confirm that he makes $2.5 million more than the Evan Fournier trade exception.
Oof. Wow. How much of that is in Bitcoin?
I mean, I would imagine all of it at this point,
right? So maybe does it count? Like, because it lost 50% of its value, so maybe he's only earning 10 million now.
Yeah, I don't have this team is. I guess I would say decidedly uninteresting because they are so good, and we don't think they need to make any other changes. Do you see them offering an extension, or would you offer an extension to Jaylen Brown this summer?
Yes, I mean,
do you think?
I don't think he takes it.
Right. I kind of thought though, like once you get into the 20% raise from where he's at, it's not that egregious for him to take it. Like, I guess if the thought is if he went on the market tomorrow, he would just get, or the whatever year, he's just going to get the full boat. Like it'll be a full max. So they should absolutely offer it on the off chance that he signs it though.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm any agent right now, I'm telling my clients, do not take an extension before the new CBA kicks in because we want to see what happens there in case they make any changes, especially to the Supermax, like, because the current Supermax just didn't work as intended. And then also like the new TV deals kick in 25, 26. So I would try to be a free agent.
Free agency the year before the TV deal kicks in.
Like a 1+1.
Right. It's just, is he the type, like, would you, I mean, that's so far down the line, but he was the only real, like, extension candidate on this team that matters. Though I say that, and Grant Williams is extension eligible as well, too.
Yeah.
And he was pretty important to them during points of the playoffs. Not so much the finals, but.
Yeah. Mort and I were trying to figure out, like, what a reasonable extension is for him. And I think we landed at, like, 12 to 14 million is as high as we would go.
I feel like that's right. And 14 might even be on the higher end because he doesn't feel like I'll say an every series player. I think you can play him all the time in the regular season, but he doesn't feel like an every series player.
Right. Yeah. Our whole thing was like, what do they project him as long term? Like, is he going to take over as their starting power forward once Horford ages out / leaves and play next to Robert Williams? Or do you see him as this like energy guy off the bench all the time? In which case you're probably less willing to pay him 8 figures annually.
No, I'd agree with you there. So I don't actually expect him or Jaylen Brown to get an extension.
Yeah, I think they will certainly try to offer it to Jaylen, and I think he will, hopefully with the guidance of his agent, he will look at the wider picture and say, no, thank you. I would like my full amount of money because he took less than the max on his current deal. So it's time to get Jaylen paid for real.
Final question on them very, very quickly. What's more likely? They use one of their trade exceptions that are worth more than the mini MLE, or they don't use their mini MLE. Just like maybe they're tax conscious and it's like, oh, we're not, they decide to be the Nuggets East. Like we're not going to spend our taxpayer MLE.
God, for their sake, I mean, I hate them. So I hope that's the case, but for their sake, I hope they use it because they, again, we're 2 wins away from the finals. This is not the time, or 2 wins away from winning the finals.
Right.
This is not the time to get cheap. So I think it is more likely that they use their trade exception and really just go all in on this thing than cheap out.
Which is also just what I would do if I was Brad Stevens.